All right, welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 159, recording on Tuesday, April 21st. I'm checking my watch, 48 hours essentially away from the NFL draft beginning, and I cannot wait for it to get here and for us to have a pick and then 9 of them potentially to cover over the next few days, and we will be very active on the Alec Lewis Show feed. So if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below. You can also like this video, and on audio, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart, you can rate and review us, and we really appreciate that. Like I said, I might even do some pop-up videos after the first round pick. Might potentially do one over the weekend after the huge day 2 that the Vikings are going to have, and then some day 3 stuff as well with some insights that I get from scouts across the league, evaluators, coaches in college that I've gotten close with and who have thoughts on some of these guys. So please stay locked into these feeds. Cannot wait to get going. On this show, what we're going to do is this. So I put together a final mock draft on the week of every draft cycle. I ran that on The Athletic on Monday morning. That's April 20th if you're looking for it. And so I'm going to talk through a lot of those selections and some of the thoughts behind them and dispersed within, kind of extrapolate from some of that story, but also give some tidbits because, as you guys probably know, when you cover a team and it is 2 days before the draft, there are a lot of conversations to be had, and whether it's agents or people throughout the league, there's a lot of conversations. So we'll get to a lot of that over the course of this show. It should be pretty fun. If you're new here, the Alec Lewis Show is presented by First Resource Bank. You guys might be asking, what is First Resource Bank? Well, it is, for my money, the best banking platform here in Minnesota. It's a member FDIC bank. They've got branches all over the place. And what really separates them is the people. It's run by some Vikings fans, Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson, who will be texting me for sure this week, questions about the draft, and I cannot wait to answer them as much as possible. We really appreciate First Resource for their support. They've been an awesome partner for this show. The show is also happy to support and sponsor Pro MN Athletics. So if you have a son, or if any of your friends have kids who play football, who play quarterback, really not just quarterback, but any position, they want the best possible training that also gives them a community of people that are like-minded and kids who want to be as good as possible at playing this sport that we all love here in Minnesota. Highly recommend Pro MN Athletics. They have a winter academy. They've got spring academies. They've got 7-on-7 league, and it's really they work with guys like Tanner Morgan, who played quarterback in Minnesota. Some other former Gophers like John Mann and Eric Carter, who are really so invested in the football space in this state, to want to give back and help kids develop and kind of understand the paths in front of them from a college and high school developmental pipeline. So those guys, Graham Kurt and Tanner Morgan over there, they really care about lifting the tide of development, of football development here in Minnesota. So please go check out Pro MN. Their information is in the description. All right, we'll get to the mock draft here, and I'll just rip some thoughts of the picks, what was going through my mind through them, of kind of some other players that I could see being in play, and we'll just run through all of that right now. So my selection at number 18 was not the most prominent one, at least yet, for the Minnesota Vikings, and it was Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. You guys might wonder why, Alec, would it make any sense for the Vikings with where they are to pick a tight end in the first round? How I'll answer that first of all is Howie Roseman, not the Vikings general manager, the Philadelphia Eagles general manager, Howie Roseman, was asked this week, what his process and his strategy and his approach is in each specific round of the draft. And his answers to that question were really, really fascinating. I'm going to pull them up because I just want to read through it because it'll kind of give a guide, and it relates to what I was thinking and what I believe the Vikings could be thinking in the first round at number 18. But here was Howie Roseman. I'm just going to read it. This is from my colleague, Zach Berman. Howie Roseman. So certainly in the first round, our grading scale speaks to us as to what we want to find. It's your chance to get a Pro Bowl player, to get a blue chip player. So we're looking for them in the first round. In the second round, we're trying to get someone who's a good starter who can make a difference. In the third round, you're trying to get a minimum of solid starters, and the same goes for the fourth round and the middle rounds, probably the fifth round as well. And then he says, I think for us, when we look at the later stages of the draft, we're shooting for starters. We had this meeting this morning, and I tell our scouts all the time, we can find backups. So if the first round, to use kind of Howie Roseman's rubric per se, is about finding a blue chip player, then it's going to be pretty difficult for the Vikings in this specific draft to do that at number 18. You talk to a lot of people throughout the league, and whether that's scouts, agents, executives, coaches, they will tell you that this draft in particular probably does not have more than 12 to 15 blue chip players. So when you're picking at 18, you're on the outside looking in most likely of those specific blue chips. And that's where, because of positional value, because of an abundance of reasons, a guy like Kenyon Sadiq could get to number 18. Now, why would that happen? Why would Kenyon Sadiq get to 18? Well, I mean, part of it, again, it is the positional value of tight ends. It's not the most, typically first rounds, tackles, edge rushers, etc. And Kenyon Sadiq plays a position that is often and has been, I guess, for years viewed as somewhat of kind of a luxury weapon. Now, I would argue, and I think the Vikings, if this were to end up happening, will probably talk about the fact that the tight end position is a crucial one in this era of where the NFL is, especially from a schematic standpoint. Like Mike McDonald, the Seahawks head coach, was on Kevin Clark's podcast, This Is Football, talking about how, offenses that have the ability to use the same types of personnel to show you 11 personnel pictures and 12 personnel pictures and 13 personnel pictures, like those offenses can dictate successfully in this era of where the NFL is. And the number changing there, 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, is often the amount of tight ends you have on the field. And when you have tight ends like a Kenyon Sadiq, who are special type of athletes or players, it gives you a different level of flexibility, perhaps, than other positions would. I've watched a lot of Kenyon Sadiq, and I've also talked to a lot of evaluators about him. What stands out immediately is, again, freak athlete. The guy is a pretty special type of vertical speed in terms of the ability to hit the third level of the field with the ball in his hands. You'd like to think that he has some really dynamic ability. And then, the evaluators also rave about, and you can see it on tape, just the willingness as a blocker to be as physical as possible. Now, is he perfect as a blocker? No. Does the technique probably need some refinement? Yes. Is he better kind of on the move than he is just playing an inline tight end position? Absolutely. But the idea of finding an offensive weapon who could change the way the defenses have to defend the Vikings at number 18 would be, in my opinion, it would be a boon. I know someone on the Oregon staff who said in all caps, this guy is the real deal in terms of Kenyon Sadiq. So the question really, above all, is is there a better defender that gets to the Vikings, that the Vikings love, who gets to the Vikings at number 18, / is Kenyon Sadiq going to a blue chip potential player in this draft when there aren't a ton of them going to fall to number 18? And there are a lot of teams within that teens mix who might be interested. And there are also possibilities that a team in the top 10 trades back. There are possibilities that a team picking in the 20s trades forward and tries to snag a guy like him. Like, there are a lot of possibilities of a player with his talent. Like, the New Orleans Saints absolutely need a pass catcher, whether they fill that hole at number 8 or whether they trade back. And there are a lot of possibilities, but that would be a team that I would mark for sure. The Ravens at 14 need a replacement for Isaiah Likely. I'm not sure if it'd be my primary expectation, but if they did Kenyon Sadiq, I wouldn't be surprised. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 15, that is a team that loves and is very rigorous with their scale from a, do we love the character of this player? And when you talk to people around Kenyon Sadiq, the character is really high quality. So if he checks the boxes and they think he can add to an offense with Baker and some of the pass catchers they have, like that one wouldn't shock me as well. So, there are some speed bumps in the road to where if Kenyon Sadiq was scooped up before number 18, not going to be very surprised by it. As far as other players at this spot, I mean, Dillon Thieneman, the Oregon safety, who has been the most, the preeminent mock draft selection from all of the national draft analysts and obviously some local folks as well. Dillon Thieneman it's understandable why he would be mocked to the Minnesota Vikings. He's a really smart player, really high character. He is a versatile player. He's probably better moving forward than he is going backward, and he has a lot of range, but I think there are some questions as far as like the quick twitch ability. Similar to, and maybe not similar, but I should have said with Kenyon Sadiq, like there are questions from a route running standpoint. He's got some development to do there. That would need more polish. And part of the way I think the Vikings could explain kind of the pick would be you plug him in as like this offensive fullback style, tight end style weapon alongside Josh Oliver and maybe even TJ Hawkinson in 2026. And then over the course of the year, working with Keenan McCardell, working with Ryan Cordell, the tight end coach, you would hope that time away from the practice field, time, not needing every little intricacy of the game plan, he could be kind of working on some of that route running ability. Dillon Thieneman, again, the people I talk to in the league, they really like Dillon Thieneman. Like I was talking to a scout earlier today who really likes him, and he said he's not going to be surprised if that guy is not there at 18. I think the question that I would have as it relates to Dillon Thieneman and the Vikings is, does Minnesota believe that the value of Dillon Thieneman at 18 works for them? Like, do they see him as the ultimate blue chip guy, or is he more in that 25 to 35 range where you'd probably be more apt to trade back and then, put yourself in the range for a guy like him there? Now, Carolina has been mocked, and Carolina's picking at number 19. They've been mocked to Dillon Thieneman a lot. So they would have to pass on him. But I think like that's the question that I have with Dillon Thieneman, and the same would go for Keldrick Falk, the the Auburn defensive tackle / defensive end. Like, really intriguing player. The film is interesting. There are some really high-end flashes, but he also is more, he's not really an edge rusher because you're not going to be dropping him out a ton. And he also doesn't have, like, the difference between a Keldrick Falk and a Jonathan Grenard, for example, is Jonathan Grenard, like, flies off the snap. It's a little different at times with Keldrick Falk. And so if the Vikings deem him more suited for that 25-35 range, would it make sense for them to just go ahead and snag that player at 18? Like, that's the type of question I imagine that will have to be fleshed out internally. And it's an interesting one. I mean, there are other wild cards that at 18, it's not gonna floor me, I would say, because of the approach that they've taken with this specific draft from a best available standpoint. Like, I've written this, but in past years, I felt pretty locked into it's probably going to be this position or this position. This time around, it's a little more murky from that standpoint with them, especially at the top. And so, let's say a Mekhi Lemon, the USC receiver, if he falls somehow and Kenyon Sadiq's off the board, would that be in play? Like, if that were to happen, I'm not gonna be absolutely stunned by it. The same goes with tackle. Like, if there is a tackle that the Vikings love at 18, It's not gonna absolutely floor me. I mean, the hard one, and it kind of flows into the 49 conversation later throughout the draft. The hard or the problematic or the tough component or layer to this specific draft is there are not a lot of interior defensive tackles who are just no-brainers for the Flores system and for what the Vikings covet from a fit standpoint. Like a couple of years ago, Byron Murphy II from Texas, if that guy was available right now in this specific draft, I would not, like, the Vikings would probably trade up to 15 or 14 ahead of the Seahawks and draft that guy because he is a perfect fit of a guy who can hold the point, who has pass rush potential, and is kind of a, I would say, 3 to 5 tech body who can really hold the point in the A gaps. And like those players are really hard to find in general, but they're really hard to find in this specific draft. And so when you're talking about a Caden McDonald from Ohio State, who's a much more of the nose tackle, like he's got a lot of production. He's got a lot of range where he's made a lot of tackles, but he's more of the 2-down player. And that at 18 is a little rich. Trade back 25 to 35, maybe that's more of the range where you feel more comfortable with the guy like that who could anchor you on the front. But that kind of segues to number 49. So in my mock draft, I had Traden Stukes, the Arizona slot corner safety type in my mock draft. So it makes sense if you're going to take a tight end who's a versatile hybrid piece in Kenyon Sadiq at 18, you're probably going to come back with defense at 49. There's not a ton of interior defensive tackles who I love at 49. I will say, I was having this conversation earlier, like, could Caleb Banks, the Florida defensive tackle, who's had some very serious feet problems, and there's questions about Caleb Banks. Like, could he fall all the way to 49? I asked that question specifically to somebody, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, but it's not the craziest idea in the world. If a guy like him fell to 49, given the Vikings' need on the interior defensive line, would they then have the gumption, let's just say, to take that swing on a player with that much risk at 49 in this specific draft with such a premium pick? Like, I don't know the answer to that question, but he is definitely, from just like, if you watch the film of the LSU tape in 2024, Florida LSU, like, he is the most menacing interior defensive lineman that you're probably going to be able to find in this draft. It's just there's considerable risk. So I just went with Traden Stukes, the Arizona safety. He's really well liked by all the people I've talked to, really smart, really versatile player who can line up everywhere. There are the question with him is similar to the question with Kenyon Sadiq. Like, is he going to be available at 49? And I would lean probably no, based upon what I've heard. The Raiders at 36, probably going to be in play for Traden Stukes. And then there are a lot of teams with some versatile defenses who really, really like him. Let's flip the conversation around a little bit. You guys might be sitting there wondering, okay, Alex, so if you take a defensive player in the first round, then what would it look like at number 49? And I'd probably say that's where I'd then expect like a big-bodied receiver type, a DeJon Stribling receiver from Ole Miss. I've got a coach down there at Ole Miss who I'm close with, who absolutely loves the player. Jeremy Bernard from Alabama is less of a big body, but he is a really reliable pass catcher. Doesn't have the most eye-popping traits, but a really solid player who the Vikings would probably be interested in and could be more likely to get to 49. But I'd say with DeJon Stribling, I've had some evaluators lob out that he could potentially be gone by 49. So, I mean, this is where the draft becomes so complicated, and why I'd say the mock drafts are really difficult, because you might know that the Vikings like a certain player or a clump of players, but so do other teams. And if those guys are plucked from the board, then you're going with plan B and C and D, and you have to be really malleable kind of from that standpoint. I mean, at 49, I'd also say defensively, there's some off-ball linebackers who would be interesting there. Anthony Hill from Texas is a really athletic guy. I need to watch more tape there. and talk to some more people about him. Another guy would be Jake Golday, the Cincinnati linebacker. Had a scout earlier today who was just absolutely raving about him as a character and what that guy would bring to a defense. So, yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at. I mean, another defensive tackle name is Kristen Miller from Georgia, but there's a lot of differing opinions on him, and he's got a pretty extensive injury history. There's some traits there for sure that people see, but I think there are a lot of people like, then why wasn't there more production there with him? So we've run through a lot of different players at 49, but it becomes pretty difficult to really center in on somebody, and that's where, again, it's going to be the responsibility of Rob Brzezinski, the Vikings interim GM, and Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores and the entire scouting staff led by Mike Shalatin to have an assortment of names that they feel really comfortable with, at some of these spots. The other one, just a note that I would say, I mean, Rob Brzezinski was asked about Jonathan Grenard on Monday at his pre-draft press conference, and he gave a pretty strong defense of the amount that they value Jonathan Grenard. We've talked about this subject time and time again here on this podcast and in writing. I would say that if a team were to try to call and get a Jonathan Grenard deal done at some point, I would expect the pick to come like around that 49 range. Like that would be a range where it would start to make sense to me. Anything worse than that, I'd say worse than like 60, you start to have a lot of questions about whether the Vikings would even like listen to that as an idea. So, and then if Jonathan Grenard, if he were to end up being traded, then an edge rusher obviously becomes important at some point in this area of the draft. But part of the reason in my mock draft I didn't have an edge rusher was because just under the impression that Jonathan Grenard will be on the Minnesota Vikings. So, at number 82, I had an off-ball linebacker, Caleb Elarms, or there are, other possibilities off-ball linebacker-wise. Keyshawn Elliott from Arizona State is another name, but those guys becoming starters, I mean, you're really kind of hoping and wishing at that point with those guys as off-ball linebackers. I would also say, in the world or the scenario where the Vikings start with Kenyon Sadiq and then they go with Traden Stukes, the safety from Arizona, then, at 82-97, that's where you're probably talking about, you're starting to talk about center, and it's still a pick your flavor there. And then you're starting to talk about defensive tackle and running back. So from a center perspective, I don't have any real insight on which specific center the Vikings are targeting and who they prefer. I've just thrown out all the names. The Logan Jones from Iowa, Sam Heck from Kansas State, Jake Slaughter from Florida, Connor Liu from Auburn, and then Parker Brailsford from Alabama, who I think could be a fit later on, and that's why I had him in my mock draft. The running backs, Emmett Johnson from Nebraska is more of your all-around type pass catcher who, in the event of an Aaron Jones injury, would be able to kind of fill a lot of those snaps. But he probably doesn't have that home run hitting ability, so would you be willing to do that, or would you just wait later on? Jonah Coleman from Washington is an interesting name. He, too, is like Emmett Johnson, where he's more of an all-around guy, not as much the home run hitter, but he has some injury stuff, I will say. It came up in a conversation earlier today, so that will probably push him beyond 97 into the round 4, round 5 range. I'd say the defensive tackles in this middle tier, defensive tackles, Darrell Jackson Jr. from Florida State, and then Nick Barrett from South Carolina are two names that I would keep eyes on. But, I mean, even with those guys, they're more of your bigger body types where you're just betting on pass rush upside. And, it's if you're picking a defensive tackle in this draft, or if you need a defensive tackle, and picking that position in this draft just doesn't make you feel the most comfortable. The other two defensive back names, I would say, Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina, and then USC's Kamari Ramsey. Ramsey played slot this past year, kind of was forced into that spot. Before that, had played deep safety, looked better there. So both guys have good movement skills. And then after that, there's kind of a drop-off as well from an athleticism standpoint of some of those defensive backs. Quick word from talking to one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back with the last few mock draft picks that I had. All right, this show is sponsored by Unreal. I'm repping it here with the quarter zip. Saw it. I was actually at a tropical location this past weekend, perhaps, and I saw someone with an Unreal hat down in another state down south, and I enjoyed getting to see that, and it was cool to see the brand being rep. But they've got a U.S. Open golf tournament collection that is pretty cool. Tournaments at Shinnecock Hills, so they've got that up and going. And then Unreal has some limited edition drops for the Wild playoffs, for the Wolf playoffs. So if you go to any of those games, please look for their stuff. It's as high quality attire as you can find, based here out of St. Paul, and they've been an awesome partner for the show, so appreciate their support. Let's get back into some of the picks. All right, at 163, like I said, I had Parker Brailsford, the Alabama center. You guys might be wondering why him and not some of the earlier centers. I just don't know if there's a ton of a gap between a guy like Logan Jones from Iowa and Parker Brailsford from Alabama, and they are both, the reason I just compare those two is they're both kind of smaller, but better fits probably for the wide zone kind of transition that the Vikings want to make from a run game perspective. Now, if it ends up being a Sam Hecht or a Jake Slaughter, or a Connor Lew from Auburn, it's not going to surprise me. All these guys are clumped, like I said earlier, in a similar like evaluation tier, but just to be able to get another skill player in at 97, this gave me some flexibility. If the Vikings wait on running back, I mean, the one guy who it's a very popular mock selection in the ether, and for good reason. I mean, Damon Claiborne, the running back from Wake Forest, some of the film is electric. Like, I turned it on a couple weeks ago, and I was clipping runs against Georgia Tech and some of these guys where, he's making cuts and extending past defenders in a way that is pretty special. So if you were to take a guy at a he's more of a change of pace type back, you're not going to probably want to rely on him a ton in pass protection, but can he be a home run hitter? You feed him 10 times a game and he could get you 16 when it's blocked for 3. Yes. And that would obviously be fun to watch. And with Kyler Murray in the backfield, be pretty dynamic. And for Kevin O'Connell as a play caller, probably give him some confidence to really get things going on the ground there. And you can squint and you're imagining an offense with Claiborne on the field in the gun next to Kyler, with Kenyon Sadiq at tight end next to Josh Oliver, and out wide you got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. And if you're a defensive coordinator trying to get your hands on all of that, it is not going to be pretty. And I don't say that from it just is what it is. Like, that is a lot of athleticism and a lot of freaking talent and explosiveness on one offense. So there's a world where you can squint and start to get probably intrigued by what it could look like come the summer, the fall, and into the season. At 196, I had Jalen Husky, the safety from Maryland. Kind of what I was looking for is like a later round, maybe deep safety who doesn't have to be the most explosive athletic guy. You think about Harrison Smith and what he's been able to do in Brian Flores' defense. He's won with smarts. He's won with angles. He's won with timing. He's won with ball skills. I think Jalen Husky from Maryland is a later round guy who fits a lot of that profile. So does Luis Moore from Indiana. Different type of, a guy, Jacoby Thomas from Miami. I've had some evaluators within the league who think he's You potentially should go much higher than like the 4th or 5th round, but he's in this range. And then down the stretch, coming in my mock draft, I had Harrison Wallace from Ole Miss, the receiver, cornerback from Tennessee, whose name is escaping me. Jalen McMurray, and then Nick Barrett, the defensive tackle. But those later picks, I mean, it could go a bunch of different ways, and you're trying to kind of corral preferred free agent circumstances, probably. So it's going to be really interesting. I'll say on Thursday night and then into day 2. And like my opinion is this: there will be a lot of hoopla one way or another on Thursday night, whether it's Kenyon Sadiq or whether it's Dillon Thieneman or whether it's a trade back and one of those guys or whether it's a trade back and somebody else. And rightly so. I mean, those guys need to be like pivotal players for your team. But for my money, the portion of this draft that is going to speak volumes as to how things and how the trajectory goes for the future of this team is going to be what happens on day 2 at 49, 82, 97. If there are trades there, if there are picks added there, like that range, that realm, and finding starters in this draft in that range is going to be just absolutely critical. I thought this was interesting, but in the Howie Roseman commentary, he said, you take 8 guys and you hit on 3, I mean, you are smoking. You are doing a really good job. So we're going to take shots on guys who have traits, and we're looking for guys that can make a difference. So we're not worried about the guys that may not, we're not looking for numbers. We're not saying, hey, 90% of the guys made our roster. We are looking for guys who can make an impact for the Philadelphia Eagles, and the draft is our opportunity to do that. And I'm not saying that the Vikings need to copy or mimic everything that Howie Roseman has done in Philadelphia, but obviously they've done a damn good job. Do I expect the Vikings to come out of this draft with 3 starters out of 9 picks? I mean, it really would be nice to emerge from the 2026 draft with 3 really solid starters at minimum who can become part of the core. And the more you look at the Vikings roster and how it's progressed and transitioned over the years, like the more I come back down, like this core is kind of at a crossroads. You've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Christian Darrisaw, who needs to prove in 2026 that he can get back on the playing field and play for 17 games. And then other than that, I mean, you've got guys like Jonathan Grenard, guys like Brian O'Neill, guys like Josh Metellus who are creeping, Byron Murphy Jr., who creeping up 28, 29, 30. And once they get over that 30 point, you really start to need to develop another core that is, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, the way that Justin Jefferson has been the last, 3-4 seasons. So this, again, it feels like a crossroads in many ways of this draft needs to be the bridge to a revamped, stockpiled core a little bit, and how they try to go about making that happen. I cannot wait to follow and document and write about at The Athletic this upcoming weekend. I mean, we're going to be absolutely loaded over there. So I've got a story Wednesday kind of looking at this draft and what it's going to mean for this team. On Thursday, we will react on the fly to the pick that is made at number 18. I will have immediate thoughts on The Athletic. I will have a deeper dive on that later that evening. And then we will have, by Friday morning, a best available, most likely options for day 2 based upon what happened in round number 1 and what I hear going into round number 2. And then Friday, we'll run it back. We will have a press conference, I'm assuming, for the first round pick flying in, and then we'll roll it into Saturday and continue to have stories galore at theathletic.com. So please don't miss any of that. And like I said, I will pop on this podcast here and now. Maybe we'll do like a 15-minute hit or a 20-minute hit, but Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you will see a lot on your feed. So please stay locked in and loaded for that. That'll do it for episode 159 of the Alec Lewis Show. We're presented by First Resource Bank. We are sponsored by Pro MN Athletics. Please go check them out for their 7-on-7 leagues this summer and take a look at their spring academy and what they're doing. It's pretty special stuff. Unreal, the clothing brand. And enjoy the mayhem of the next couple days. And I promise we will talk to you very, very soon.